Hacked Jabim's stubby fingers trembled as he tightened the last bolt on the navigation console. The acrid smell of ozone and machine oil filled his nostrils, a scent that had become all too familiar over the past 14 races. His large, round eyes darted nervously around the cramped bridge of the Broken Promise, taking in the worn panels and flickering displays that had been his world for what felt like an eternity. As he worked, unbidden memories of his sentencing flooded back. The harsh lights of the human courtroom, the incomprehensible rapid-fire speech of the judge, the confusion and terror as he realized the severity of his punishment. All for a simple theft, a desperate attempt to feed his starving family back on the Hibbard homeworld. One little mistake, Hacked muttered, his whiskers twitching in agitation. And now I'm here, about to risk my life for the 15th time for these humans' sick entertainment. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder, making him jump. Hacked looked up to see the weathered face of Captain Jeb Sheets looming over him. "You all right there?" Hacked Jeb's voice was gruff but not unkind. "We need you focused for this one. It's a big race." Hacked nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Captain. Just pre-race jitters, I suppose." Jeb's eyes softened slightly. "I know it's tough, especially after our last run. But we've got to push past it. This is race number 37 for me, and I'll be damned if it's not going to be our comeback." The human captain turned to address the rest of the alien crew scattered around the bridge. His voice rose, filled with a determination that Hacked couldn't help but admire, even if he didn't fully understand it. "Listen up, everyone. I know our last loss hit us hard. 12 wins in a row, only to have it snatched away at the finish line. But that's behind us now. Today we start our path to freedom anew." Hacked watched as his fellow crew members, a motley assortment of aliens from across the galaxy, perked up at Jeb's words. Even Killian, the perpetually dour human weapons officer, seemed to be paying attention. "The Kipling System's asteroid belt is no joke," Jeb continued, "but neither are we. We've faced worse and come out on top. Remember, every race we win is one step closer to home, one step closer to proving that we're more than just cannon fodder for their entertainment." A chorus of cheers and grunts of agreement rose from the crew. Hacked felt a tiny spark of hope ignite in his chest, despite his best efforts to smother it. He'd seen how hope could be crushed in this cruel game. Hacked Jeb called, snapping him back to attention. "How are we looking on nav systems?" "All green," Captain Hacked replied, double-checking his console. "I've plotted several potential routes through the belt, accounting for the sparse and dense regions." Jeb nodded approvingly. "Good work. Killian, weapon status." The grizzled human grunted from his station. "Locked and loaded, Cap. Not that it'll make a difference. It never does." "That attitude won't fly today," Killian Jeb snapped. "I need everyone giving 110%. This could be the race that turns it all around." Killian muttered something under his breath, but didn't argue further. As the crew bustled around him, making last-minute preparations, Hacked couldn't help but marvel at the conflicting emotions swirling within him. Fear, resignation, and a tiny, persistent flame of hope that refused to be extinguished. He glanced at Jeb, standing tall and confident despite the weight of 36 previous races. Maybe, Hacked thought, his whiskers twitching thoughtfully, just maybe, this human's crazy dream isn't so impossible after all. The warning klaxon sounded, signaling 10 minutes until race start. The Broken Promise hummed to life around them, systems engaging one by one. As Hacked settled into his station, he allowed himself a small prayer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening. "Let us survive this race," he whispered. "And maybe, someday, let us be free." The Broken Promise drifted into position, a battered relic among dozens of other prisoner ships. Through the viewscreen, Hacked could see the glittering expanse of the Kipling System's asteroid belt stretching out before them. Distant chunks of rock tumbled slowly in the void, deceptively peaceful from afar. Jeb Sheets stood at the center of the bridge, his weathered hands gripping the command rail. "All stations, report in." "Navigation ready," Hacked chirped, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. The weapons hot Killian grunted from his post. One by one, The alien crew members called out their readiness. Jeb nodded, satisfaction evident in his stern features. He took a deep breath, and Hacked recognized the telltale signs of an incoming speech. "Listen up," Crew Jeb began, his voice low but intense. "I know we're all still smarting from our last loss. 12 wins, gone in a flash. But that's the past, and this," he gestured to the asteroid field before them. "This is our future." Hacked felt his fur bristle with a mixture of fear and anticipation. He'd heard variations of this speech before, but something in Jeb's tone made him pay closer attention this time. "Each of you is here for different reasons. Some crimes petty, some not. But out there in that field of rock and vacuum, none of that matters. What matters is that we're a team. We're the crew of the Broken Promise, and today we're going to start our journey back to freedom." A ripple of murmurs passed through the alien crew. Hacked caught sight of Killian rolling his eyes, but even the cynical gunner seemed to be listening intently. "Remember," Jeb continued, his voice rising, "every race we survive is a victory against those who put us here. Every ship we outmaneuver, every asteroid we dodge, every finish line we cross, it's all one step closer to home, to our families, to our lives." Hacked felt a lump forming in his throat. He thought of his own family back on the Hibbert homeworld, wondering if they still remembered him, still hoped for his return. He saw similar emotions reflected in the eyes of his fellow crew members. "So when that starting signal flares, I want every one of you giving everything you've got. Because we're not just racing for our lives today. We're racing for our freedom, for our dignity, and for every poor soul who's been sentenced to this hell. Are you with me?" A chorus of cheers erupted from the crew. Even Killian managed a gruff eye. Captain Hacked found himself swept up in the moment, his squeaky voice joining the affirmations. As the cheers died down, a booming voice filled the bridge, the race announcer, broadcasting to all ships and the untold millions watching across the galaxy. "Racers, prepare for the 8,457th Kipling asteroid run. The course is a full traversal of the belt, approximately 240 million miles. Last place finisher will be eliminated. Survivors may live to race another day. Victors move one step closer to potential freedom." Hacked shuddered at the casual way the announcer discussed their potential deaths. He glanced at Jeb, seeing the human's jaw clench in barely contained anger. "Remember, folks," the announcer continued, his voice dripping with false cheer, "these races are brought to you by the Galactic Corrections Department. Justice served at lightspeed." A low growl emanated from Killian's station. "Justice? My ass," the gunner muttered. "Cool it," Killian Jeb warned, though Hacked could see the captain shared the sentiment. "Save that anger for the race." The final countdown began. Hack's paws flew over his console, bringing up the navigational data he'd prepared. He felt the ship's engines humming beneath him, building to a crescendo. 10 seconds to start, the announcer called out. 9, 8. Jeb gripped the command rail tighter. "Everyone ready? This is where we start our comeback." 7, 6, 5. Hack's whiskers twitched nervously. He stole a glance at the asteroid field looming before them. Somewhere in that chaos lay their path to victory or doom. 4, 3, 2. "For freedom," Jeb whispered, echoed by murmurs throughout the bridge. 1. Race start. The Broken Promise surged forward, joining the chaotic rush of ships plunging into the asteroid belt. As they crossed the starting line, Hacked felt the familiar mix of terror and exhilaration flood his system. Another race had begun. Another chance at survival. Another step on the long road to freedom. The Broken Promise lurched forward, its ancient engines roaring to life as it plunged into the asteroid belt alongside 24 other vessels. Hack's paws flew across his console, eyes darting between readouts and the main view screen. "Sparse field ahead," Captain Hacked called out, his voice high and tense. "Largest objects are approximately 500 meters in diameter, scattered about every 10,000 kilometers." Jeb nodded, his hands steady on the helm. "Good. We'll use the big ones for cover. Killian, keep an eye out for anyone trying to play dirty early." "Always do." Cap the grizzled gunner replied, his fingers hovering over the weapon's controls. The ship weaved through the void, smaller rocks pinging off its hull. Jeb's piloting was masterful, each movement precise and calculated. They passed the first large asteroid, using its bulk to shield them from view momentarily. "We're in 6th position," Hack reported, checking the race standings. "Wait incoming. Port side." A sleek, dark vessel suddenly appeared from behind the asteroid, on a collision course with the Broken Promise. Evasive maneuvers, Jeb barked, yanking the controls hard to starboard. The ship groaned in protest as it veered sharply away from the attacker. Killian didn't wait for orders. A burst of energy erupted from the Broken Promise's forward guns, forcing the enemy ship to break off its approach. "Lousy Centaurian tactics," Killian spat, always trying to ram in the early game. "Nice shooting," Jeb acknowledged. "Hacked, find us a path with more cover. We need to." His words were cut off as the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared across the bridge. "A hit to our aft shields," one of the alien crew members called out. "We've lost 30% capacity." Jeb's face hardened. "Killian, return fire." "Hacked, I need options." Hack's mind raced as he scanned his instruments. "There's a cluster of medium-sized asteroids about 500,000 kilometers ahead. If we can reach it, we might lose them in the debris." "Do it," Jeb ordered, his hands dancing across the controls. The Broken Promise surged forward, its engines straining as it accelerated towards the asteroid cluster. The enemy ship pursued, firing intermittently. Killian returned fire, the exchange lighting up the void around them. As they neared the cluster, more ships came into view, the race leaders, navigating through the rocky maze. "We're catching up to the pack," Hack reported, a note of excitement creeping into his voice. "Currently in 4th place. A ghost of a smile flickered across Jeb's face. "Now we're talking." "All right, crew, this is where it gets tricky. Brace for tight maneuvering." The Broken Promise dove into the asteroid cluster, rocks of varying sizes whizzing past on all sides. Jeb's piloting was put to the test as he wove through the debris, simultaneously trying to gain position and shake off their pursuer. Hacked felt his heart pounding in his chest, his tiny paws moving in a blur as he fed Jeb constant navigational data. The rest of the alien crew worked in tense silence, each focused intently on their tasks. A particularly large asteroid loomed ahead. Instead of going around, Jeb aimed straight for it. Captain Hacked squeaked nervously. "Trust me," Jeb replied, his voice tight with concentration. At the last possible second, Jeb pulled up, skimming the surface of the asteroid. Their pursuer, caught off guard by the maneuver, clipped the rock and spun out of control. "Hey," Killian barked. "That's what you get, you Centaurian." "Language," Killian, Jeb admonished, but there was a hint of amusement in his tone. "Hacked, status report." Hacked quickly scanned his readouts. "We've moved into 3rd place, Captain. Shields are holding at 65%, and we've got a clear path ahead to the next sector." A cheer went up from the crew. Even Killian allowed himself a grudging nod of approval. Jeb took a deep breath, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. "Well done, everyone, but don't get comfortable. We've got a long race ahead of us, and the real challenges are yet to come." As if to emphasize his point, the ship's long-range sensors began to light up. Ahead lay the dense zone of the asteroid belt, a chaotic maelstrom of rock and ice that would push the Broken Promise and its crew to their very limits. Hacked gazed at the ominous readings, a shiver running down his spine. They had survived the first leg of the race, but he knew the true test was only just beginning. The Broken Promise hurtled towards the looming wall of asteroids that marked the beginning of the dense zone. Hack's eyes widened as he took in the chaotic swirl of rocks ahead, ranging from pebble-sized debris to planetoids larger than the ship itself. "Dense zone approaching," Captain Hacked reported, his voice quavering slightly. "Asteroid density it's off the charts. I've never seen anything like this." Jeb's face was a mask of concentration as he studied the view screen. "All right, people, this is where we separate the racers from the space dust. Hacked, I need you to be my eyes. call out every potential collision course, no matter how small. "Aye," Captain Hacked squeaked, forcing himself to focus on his console. As they plunged into the dense zone, the difference was immediately apparent. Rocks of all sizes zipped past the view screen in a dizzying blur. The ship shuddered constantly from impacts with smaller debris. "Incoming cluster," portside Hacked called out. Jeb's hands flew across the controls, sending the broken promise into a tight spin. They threaded through a gap between two bus-sized asteroids with barely a meter to spare on either side. Shields holding at 62%, one of the alien crew members reported. "Minor hull breaches on decks 3 and 4, but auto repair systems are responding." Killian's gruff voice cut through the tension. "Two bogies on our tail. Looks like they're trying to use us as a battering ram." "Not today," Jeb growled. "Hacked, find me a nasty patch of rocks." "Killian, be ready to fire on my mark." Hacked scanned frantically, his whiskers twitching. "There's a dense cluster about 10,000 kilometers ahead. Lots of jagged edges, highly unstable." "Perfect," Jeb grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. He gunned the engines, aiming straight for the deadly cluster. The pursuing ships followed, closing the gap. Just as they were about to overtake the broken promise, Jeb shouted, "Now, Killian." A barrage of fire erupted from the broken promise's aft weapons, not aimed at the pursuers, but at the asteroid cluster ahead. The impacts shattered the already unstable rocks, sending a wave of debris hurtling back towards them. Jeb waited until the last possible second before yanking the controls hard, sending their ship into a gut-wrenching dive. They scraped past the debris field with centimeters to spare. Their pursuers weren't so lucky. One ship was pummeled by the rock storm, spiraling out of control. The other managed to evade but fell far behind in the process. A ragged cheer went up from the crew. Even Hacked found himself squeaking in excitement. "Don't celebrate yet," Jeb cautioned, though a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "We've still got a long way to go. Hacked, what's our position?" Hacked checked his readouts, his eyes widening in surprise. We're in second place, Captain. The lead ship is only 50,000 kilometers ahead." "Now that's more like it," Jeb nodded approvingly. "Let's see if we can close that gap. Killian, keep an eye out for any more uninvited guests. Everyone else, stay sharp. This dense zone is far from over." As if to emphasize his point, a massive asteroid suddenly loomed before them, easily 10 times the size of the broken promise. "Evasive action," Hacked cried out. Jeb didn't respond verbally. His hands became a blur on the controls as he sent the ship into a series of maneuvers that defied belief. The broken promise rolled, pitched, and yawed through a maze of smaller asteroids orbiting the giant rock, using their gravitational fields to slingshot past. As they cleared the massive asteroid, Hacked realized he had been holding his breath. He looked around the bridge and saw similar expressions of awe on the faces of his fellow alien crew members. Even Killian looked impressed. "How? How did you do that?" Hacked asked, unable to contain his amazement. Jeb shrugged, his eyes never leaving the view screen. Years of practice and a healthy dose of desperation. "Now let's see about catching that lead ship." As the broken promise pressed on through the dense zone, Hacked felt something shift within him. The constant fear that had been his companion since his sentencing was still there, but it was joined by something new, a growing sense of excitement, and dare he admit it, hope. For the first time, Hacked began to believe that maybe, just maybe, Jeb's dream of freedom wasn't so impossible after all. With a renewed sense of determination, he turned back to his console, ready to face whatever challenges the race might throw at them next. Hours had passed since the broken promise entered the dense zone of the Kipling asteroid belt. The initial adrenaline rush had long since faded, replaced by a bone-deep weariness that seemed to permeate the very air of the bridge. Hack's paws felt heavy on his console, his usually twitchy whiskers drooping with fatigue. He blinked hard, trying to focus on the stream of data flowing across his screen. A quick glance around the bridge showed similar signs of exhaustion on the faces of his fellow crew members. Even Jeb, who had been a pillar of energy and determination, showed signs of strain. His movements, while still precise, had lost some of their earlier fluidity. Dark circles had formed under his eyes, which remained fixed on the view screen with unwavering intensity. "Status report," Jeb called out, his voice slightly hoarse from hours of giving commands. "Still holding second place," Captain Hack reported, stifling a yawn. "Lead ship is about 30,000 kilometers ahead. Third place is..." He squinted at his console. "Sorry, third place is about 45,000 kilometers behind us." Killian grunted from his station. "Shields at 54%. We've taken a beating, but we're still in one piece, more or less." Jeb nodded, then seemed to notice the flagging energy of his crew. He was silent for a moment, then spoke up, his voice softer than usual. "You know, this reminds me of a time back home. I was maybe 10 years old, and there was this big storm coming." As Jeb began his story, Hack found himself drawn in despite his exhaustion. The human's voice painted a vivid picture of a young boy and his family preparing for a hurricane, boarding up windows and storing supplies. "And just when we thought we couldn't take any more, the eye of the storm passed over us," Jeb continued. "Everything went quiet. We stepped outside, and you could see stars in this perfect circle of clear sky, surrounded by the storm walls on all sides." Hack noticed the other aliens leaning in, captivated by the tale. Even Killian had turned from his console to listen. "That's where we are now," Jeb said, his eyes sweeping across the bridge. "We're in the eye of the storm. We've weathered the worst of it, and yeah, we're tired. But we're still here, still fighting. And when that storm wall hits us again, we'll be ready." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crew. Hack felt a renewed surge of energy, his whiskers perking up once more. Killian cleared his throat. "Nice story, Cap. But it doesn't change the fact that we're still stuck in this metal coffin, racing for the amusement of." "We're racing for our freedom," Killian. Jeb cut him off, but not unkindly. "For a chance to see our families again. To feel solid ground beneath our feet. To live, not just survive." The grizzled gunner fell silent, a conflicted look crossing his face. Hack, emboldened by Jeb's words, spoke up. "Captain? If we do win our freedom, what's the first thing you'll do when you get home?" A soft smile played across Jeb's lips, his eyes taking on a distant look. "I'll hug my kids so tight they'll probably complain I'm squishing them. Then I'll kiss my wife like it's the first time all over again." He paused, chuckling softly. "And then I'll probably sleep for a week straight in a real bed." The bridge filled with laughter, the sound strange but welcome after so many hours of tense silence. Other crew members began to share their own dreams of freedom, their voices a mix of hope and longing. As Hack listened to his crewmates, he realized something had changed. They were no longer just a collection of convicted criminals thrown together by circumstance. Somewhere along the way, through the life and death struggles they'd faced together, they had become a team. A family of sorts. The moment was broken by a sudden blaring of alarms. Hack's console lit up with warning signals. "Captain," he called out, his voice high with renewed urgency. "Massive debris field ahead, and the lead ship. They're slowing down. I think they're in trouble." Jeb's posture straightened, all signs of fatigue vanishing in an instant. "Looks like the storm's picking up again, folks. Killian, charge weapons. Hack, plot me a course through that debris. Everyone else, battle stations." As the crew leapt into action with newfound energy, Hack felt a curious mix of fear and excitement coursing through him. They were racing into danger once again, but this time it felt different. This time they were racing together, united in their hope for freedom. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.